For most passengers, the flight began like any other ordinary journey. People found their seats, adjusted their belts, and settled into the quiet comfort of routine. The aircraft climbed smoothly, cutting through clouds until it reached its cruising height of 30,000 feet. Inside the cabin, there was soft chatter, the low hum of engines, and the gentle feeling of safety that comes when people trust the systems around them. Among the passengers was an 11-year-old girl, traveling with an adult family member. She sat quietly by the window, watching the sky stretch endlessly beyond the glass, unaware that this flight would soon change her life forever. She was not loud or demanding. Like many children, she observed more than she spoke. She noticed small things: how the wings slightly bent in the air, how the cabin lights reflected on the window, and how the flight attendants moved calmly up and down the aisle. Everything felt controlled and predictable. The adults around her trusted the pilots in the cockpit, believing they were in safe and capable hands. About an hour into the flight, something subtle shifted. It was not sudden panic or loud alarms. It was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than before. A flight attendant stopped mid-step, her face tightening just slightly. Another attendant quietly moved toward the front of the plane. Most passengers did not notice at first, but the girl did. She sensed that something was wrong, even if she didn't understand it yet. Behind the closed cockpit door, the captain had collapsed. A heart attack had struck without warning. The co-pilot struggled to manage the situation while trying to communicate with air traffic control. Every second mattered. The aircraft was still stable, but the situation was fragile. Flying a plane at that altitude is not just about steering. It requires constant monitoring, decisions, and control. The weight of responsibility suddenly became overwhelming for one person alone. In the cabin, a quiet announcement followed. The voice over the speaker was calm, but too careful. Passengers were told to remain seated. No further explanation was given. Anxiety began to spread, slowly at first, like ripples in water. People exchanged looks. Some clutched their armrests. Others whispered prayers. The young girl felt her heart beating faster. She didn't panic, but she felt the tension pressing in on her chest. Then something unexpected happened. A flight attendant approached the row where the girl was seated. The attendant knelt down, lowering her voice, trying to sound gentle but serious. She asked a question that felt impossible. She asked if the girl had ever spent time in a cockpit before. The girl hesitated, confused. She answered honestly. She had visited one once, on the ground, as a curious child. She had asked questions. She had listened closely. She remembered the controls, the screens, the way pilots talked about altitude and speed. That memory, which once felt small and unimportant, suddenly mattered. The adults around them listened in shock. Some protested quietly. She was just a child. How could she help? But the situation had reached a point where every possible option needed to be considered. The co-pilot needed assistance. Ground control was offering guidance, but someone had to physically be there, alert, focused, and responsive. The girl felt fear, real fear, but she also felt something else, a sense that she could not ignore. People needed help. The plane needed help. And for reasons she did not fully understand, she was being asked to step forward. As she stood up, her legs felt weak. The aisle seemed longer than before. Every step toward the cockpit felt heavy, like walking against strong wind. Passengers watched silently, their expressions filled with disbelief and hope at the same time. Some held their breath. Others closed their eyes. Inside the cockpit, the environment was intense but controlled. Lights blinked softly. Screens glowed with numbers and symbols. The co-pilot looked exhausted but determined. He spoke clearly, guiding her, explaining only what was necessary. There was no shouting, no chaos, just urgency. She took the seat, her feet barely reaching the pedals. Her hands hovered near the controls. She listened carefully, repeating instructions in her mind. Stay steady. Follow directions. Don't panic. The voice from ground control came through the radio, calm and precise, breaking complex tasks into simple steps out at 30,000 feet above the earth. An 11-year-old girl sat in the pilot's seat, facing a responsibility far beyond her years. She was scared, but she was present. She was not pretending to be brave. She was simply doing what needed to be done. And in that moment, the meaning of courage quietly changed for everyone on board. As the aircraft continued forward through the open sky, the initial shock slowly gave way to a tense rhythm. Nothing dramatic happened all at once. There were no sudden drops or loud alarms. Instead, the danger came from how fragile everything felt. One wrong move, one missed instruction, could change everything. The girl could feel this weight pressing on her, even though no one said it out loud. Her hands rested near the controls, not gripping them tightly, but not pulling away either. She listened closely to every word spoken around her. The co-pilot spoke slowly, choosing simple phrases. He did not treat her like a child in that moment. He treated her like someone who needed clarity. That made all the difference. The calm tone helped steady her breathing, which had been uneven since she entered the cockpit. From the radio, voices from the ground filled the small space. Air traffic control was aware of the emergency. They asked questions, checked numbers, and gave instructions one step at a time. They knew the situation was unusual, but they did not focus on that. They focused on keeping the plane stable. The girl repeated instructions softly to herself before acting. Adjust slightly. Hold steady, watch the numbers. Each small success gave her a little more confidence. Behind the cockpit door, the passengers waited. Time felt stretched. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone could feel that something serious was unfolding. Some people stared at the ceiling, listening for changes in engine sound. Others held hands. A few quietly cried. The idea that a child was involved did not cross most minds yet. They simply hoped that whoever was in control knew what they were doing. Inside the cockpit, the co-pilot checked on the captain. The situation had not improved. Medical assistance was being prepared on the ground, but for now, the focus remained on flying. The girl glanced over once, her stomach tightening. She quickly looked back to the controls. She understood without being told that distractions could be dangerous. She pushed her fear aside and focused on what was directly in front of her. The plane encountered light turbulence. Nothing severe, but enough to cause a gentle shake. The girl stiffened, her heart racing again. The co-pilot reassured her. This was normal. Planes are built for this. His words grounded her. She adjusted as instructed, keeping the aircraft level. The turbulence passed, but the tension did not fully leave. Minutes felt like hours. The sun shifted outside the cockpit windows, casting a different light across the panels. The girl's eyes began to ache from concentration, but she did not complain. She knew this was not the time. Every movement she made was careful. Every decision was guided. She was not flying alone, even though it felt that way at times. On the ground, arrangements were being made. An airport was cleared. Emergency crews were placed on standby. Runways were prepared. The goal was clear: get the plane down safely. But before that could happen, the aircraft needed to descend gradually. The girl listened as descent was explained in simple terms. Lower altitude, reduced speed, smooth adjustments. She nodded, absorbing each instruction. As the plane began to descend, the pressure in the cabin changed slightly. Some passengers noticed their ears popping. A flight attendant made another calm announcement, assuring everyone that preparations were underway. The voice was steady, but emotions were close to the surface. The flight attendants themselves were holding on to hope, trusting the unseen teamwork happening beyond the cockpit door. Back inside, The girl felt a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. It no longer froze her. It sharpened her focus. She understood now that fear did not always mean stop. Sometimes it meant proceed carefully. She asked questions when she didn't understand. The co-pilot answered patiently. There was no room for ego or pride. Only survival mattered. Each answered question built trust. Each correct adjustment built momentum. The sky outside grew darker as clouds gathered below. The ground was getting closer, though still unseen. The girl realized how far they still had to go. This was not over. The hardest part was still ahead. Yet, despite everything, the plane remained steady, and so did she. As the plane continued its slow descent, the air inside the cockpit felt heavier, not because of altitude, but because of responsibility. The girl could sense that they were entering a new phase of the emergency. Cruising was one thing. Coming down was another. The margin for error was becoming smaller with every passing minute. Her body was tired now. Her shoulders felt stiff, and her fingers ached slightly from staying tense for so long. Still, she did not let herself relax too much. She had learned quickly that focus could not be switched on and off. It had to be held, like balance on a narrow path. The co-pilot reminded her gently to blink, to breathe, to keep her movements smooth. Small reminders, but important ones. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky no longer looked endless. Layers of clouds moved beneath them, thick and uneven. The girl watched them closely, wondering what waited below. She had never thought much about landing before. To her, it had always been the easy part of flying. Now she understood how wrong that idea was. Landing required timing, judgment, and calm nerves. In the cabin, passengers were growing more restless. The flight attendants moved quietly, checking seatbelts and offering reassurance with their eyes more than their words. People could feel the plane lowering. The engine sounded slightly different. A few passengers began to realize that this was not a routine descent. Fear spread, but so did trust. There was nothing else to do but believe that someone, somewhere, was handling it. Back in the cockpit, instructions continued to come from the radio. The voices were steady and clear, breaking every action into steps that felt manageable. The girl repeated them softly before moving her hands. She had learned that repeating helped her avoid mistakes. Speed adjustments were made carefully. Altitude numbers changed slowly. Each correct response felt like placing another brick in a fragile bridge. At one point, the co-pilot asked her how she was feeling. The question surprised her. She paused before answering. She said she was scared, but still okay. It was the truth. Fear was there, sitting quietly, but it was no longer controlling her. Saying it out loud made it feel lighter. The plane hit another patch of turbulence, stronger than before. The cockpit shook and warning lights flickered briefly. The girl's breath caught in her chest. Her hands tightened instinctively. The co-pilot spoke firmly but calmly, guiding her through it. Hold steady. Do not overcorrect. Trust the aircraft. She followed the instructions exactly, resisting the urge to react too quickly. When the shaking stopped, there was a moment of silence. The girl realized her heart was pounding loudly in her ears. She took a slow breath, just like she had been told earlier. The plane remained stable. Nothing had gone wrong. That realization brought a quiet wave of relief. On the ground, emergency. Teams were ready and waiting. Doctors, fire crews, and support staff stood by the runway. They had been briefed on the situation. Some knew a child was involved, but many did not. What mattered was preparation. Everyone was focused on the same goal. As the plane dropped lower, the girl began to see faint shapes through breaks in the clouds. Land, buildings, roads. It felt unreal. The world she was used to seeing from the ground was now rising up toward her. The responsibility felt heavier again. but she reminded herself that she was not alone. Every move she made was supported by voices guiding her. The co-pilot began explaining the approach. His words were slow and simple. Angle, speed, alignment. He did not rush her. He knew that pressure could lead to mistakes. The girl nodded, absorbing each detail. She asked him to repeat one instruction, just to be sure. He did, without hesitation. In the cabin, another announcement was made. The voice informed passengers that the plane would be landing soon and that emergency crews would be present as a precaution. That was all that was said. No panic, no drama, just facts. People straightened in their seats. Some wiped tears from their faces. Others squeezed hands tighter. The girl glanced briefly at the instruments again. Everything was still within safe ranges. That small fact gave her strength. She focused forward, blocking out everything else. She understood now that bravery did not mean feeling fearless. It meant staying present even when fear tried to pull her away. The runway was not visible yet, but it was getting closer. And with it the moment that would test everything she had done so far. The closer the plane moved toward the ground, the more real everything became. This was no longer about holding altitude or following calm instructions in open sky. This was about precision. The girl could feel it in the way the co-pilot leaned forward slightly, in the way the radio voices became more frequent, more focused. Every second now mattered in a different way. Her breathing was slow but deep. She had learned to control it without being told. Each breath helped her hands stay steady. The controls no longer felt strange. They were still intimidating, but they no longer felt foreign. She had spent enough time with them now to understand how sensitive they were. Small movements mattered. Big ones could be dangerous. Outside, the clouds thinned. The land below was clearer now. Fields, roads, and clusters of buildings appeared, growing larger as the plane descended. The girl felt a strange sense of distance, closing like the world was gently rising to meet them. It made her stomach tighten, but she did not look away. She forced herself to keep watching, to stay connected to what was happening. The co-pilot explained the next steps carefully. He spoke as if teaching, not commanding. That tone kept her calm. She listened, nodded, and repeated the instructions back to him to be sure she understood. Speed needed to come down slowly. The angle had to be just right. Too steep or too shallow could cause problems. She focused on one instruction at a time, not letting her mind jump ahead. In the cabin, the mood had changed again. People could now see the ground through their windows. Some felt relief. Others felt fear growing stronger. The truth was settling in. Something unusual was happening. A few passengers whispered quietly, guessing at what might be wrong. Still, no one panicked. The flight attendants remained steady, their calm presence holding the cabin together. Back in the cockpit, the girl's arms began to feel tired. She adjusted her position slightly, careful not to make sudden movements. The co-pilot noticed and helped her reposition safely. He reminded her that discomfort was normal, that fatigue could happen in long situations like this. His awareness made her feel supported. She was not being tested. She was being guided. The radio crackled again. The runway was now confirmed. Wind conditions were shared. Visibility was good. These details mattered more than ever. The girl listened closely, her mind working hard to connect everything she was hearing. She imagined the runway ahead, even though she could not see it yet. She imagined the plane lining up, descending smoothly, touching down safely. Then came a moment of doubt. Her hands trembled slightly. Not enough to cause trouble, but enough for her to notice. The weight of what she was doing pressed down on her suddenly. She thought of how young she was. She thought of the people behind her. For a brief moment, fear tried to rush back in, stronger than before. The co-pilot saw it immediately. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush. He simply reminded her to focus on the present moment, not the landing, not the people, just the next step, just the next number, just the next instruction. His calm broke the fear into smaller pieces, pieces she could manage. She nodded, swallowing hard, and steadied her hands as they moved lower. The plane's speed continued to decrease. The engines responded smoothly. Everything was still under control. That fact alone felt like a small miracle. The girl had begun to understand that planes are built to help pilots, not fight them. As long as she respected the limits, the aircraft would respond. The runway finally came into view, long and straight, stretching out ahead. The sight made her heart race. This was it. There was no turning back now. The approach had begun. The co-pilot spoke quietly, guiding her eyes, telling her where to focus. Not the edges, not the buildings nearby. Just the center line. Just the path ahead. In the cabin, people leaned forward in their seats. Some held their breath. Others whispered words of hope. A few sensed that the most difficult part was happening right now, though they didn't know why. The plane felt different, lower, slower, closer to the earth. The girl's focus sharpened. Her fear faded into the background, replaced by determination. She had come this far. She could not stop now. She followed every instruction, adjusting gently, correcting carefully. The runway grew larger. The ground felt closer than ever. There was still danger ahead. One mistake could change everything. But in that moment, she was ready to face it. The plane was now fully committed to landing. There was no more open sky ahead, no more time to adjust slowly. Every movement had to be intentional. The girl could feel it in the way the aircraft responded, in the way the co-pilot's voice became even more precise. This was the narrow path between control and chaos, and she was walking it one careful step at a time. The runway stretched out beneath the cockpit windows, wide and solid, yet it felt almost unreal. From this angle, it looked smaller than she had imagined. Her heart beat harder as she realized how fast they were still moving, even though the speed had already been reduced. The ground does not wait. It rises quickly, and it demands respect. The co-pilot guided her attention to the most important instruments. He reminded her to trust the numbers, not her instincts alone. Feelings could lie under pressure, but the instruments told the truth. She nodded, her eyes moving back and forth, checking what she had been taught to check. Her hands made tiny adjustments, barely noticeable, but enough to keep the plane aligned. Inside the cabin, silence had taken over. Conversations had stopped. Even crying had quieted. People sensed that this was the moment where everything would be decided. Seatbelts were tight. Eyes were closed. Hands were clenched. No one knew who was guiding the plane, but everyone was. Hoping with everything they had. The girl's mouth felt dry. She swallowed and focused on her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and steady. She remembered being told that panic comes when breathing becomes shallow. She refused to let that happen. Each breath was a promise to stay. Calm. As the plane descended further, the wind pushed against it. A slight drift pulled them off center. The girl noticed it immediately. Her chest tightened, but she didn't freeze. She corrected gently, just as she had been shown. The plane responded, sliding back into alignment. That small success gave her a surge of confidence. She could do this. She was doing it. The co-pilot stayed close, ready to intervene if needed, but he did not rush her. He trusted her focus. He trusted the process. His confidence in her mattered more than he realized. It made her feel capable, not fragile. The runway lights passed faster now. The ground was rushing up. The co-pilot began counting down important points, his voice steady and calm. He reminded her when to ease back, when to prepare for contact. The girl listened with everything she had. Her world had narrowed to the runway and the voice beside her. Just before touchdown, fear tried one last time to break through. What if she misjudged it? What if she pulled too soon or too late? The thoughts flashed through her mind like lightning. But she did not let them take control. She pushed them aside and trusted the guidance she had been given. The wheels touched the ground. There was a heavy jolt, firm but controlled. The sound echoed through the plane. For a split second, everything felt uncertain. Then the plane stayed down. It did not bounce. It did not lift again. It rolled forward, fast but stable. A collective gasp filled the cabin, followed by a rush of emotion. Some people cried openly now. Others laughed in disbelief. Relief poured through the aircraft like warm air. They were on the ground. The girl kept her focus. The co-pilot instructed her through the rollout, speed reduction, direction, control, smooth braking. She followed each step carefully. The plane slowed, gradually, safely. Emergency vehicles appeared along the sides of the runway, their lights flashing. The sight made everything feel real all at once. As the plane came to a complete stop, silence returned deeper than before. The girl sat still, her hands resting on the controls. Her body felt heavy, drained, like all the strength had left her at once. Only then did her hands begin to shake. The co-pilot spoke softly, telling her it was okay now, it was over. She nodded, tears finally filling her eyes. She had held them back for so long, and now they came freely. She had been scared. She had been brave. She had done something no one would ever expect from a child her age. Behind her, hundreds of lives had been carried safely to the ground. And for the first time since entering the cockpit, she allowed herself to feel it. After the plane came to a complete stop, the world seemed to pause. The engine slowed to a low hum, and the flashing lights outside painted the cockpit windows with moving colors. The girl sat very still, as if any movement might break the moment. Her hands were no longer on the controls now. They rested in her lap, trembling slightly. The co-pilot gently took over the remaining procedures, guiding the aircraft into a safe position as emergency teams surrounded them. Inside the cockpit, the air felt different. The tension that had filled the space for so long slowly began to lift. The girl finally realized how tired she was. Not just physically, but deep inside. Her shoulders slumped, and she leaned back in the seat, staring forward. For the first time since everything began, there was nothing she needed to do. On the runway, emergency crews moved quickly but calmly. Doors were opened. Medical staff rushed in to help the captain. Their movements were practiced and focused. The girl watched quietly as the captain was carefully taken away. She felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what had happened, and relief that help had arrived in time. In the cabin, passengers were slowly learning the truth. Whispers spread, turning into quiet conversations. Someone mentioned a child. Someone else shook their head in disbelief. When the full story began to settle in, the mood changed again. Shock turned into awe. Fear turned into gratitude. People looked around at one another, realizing how close they had come to something far worse. A flight attendant approached the cockpit and gently asked the girl if she was okay. The question felt strange to her. She nodded, though she wasn't sure how to describe what she was feeling. Okay did not feel like the right word. She felt small again. Just a child who had been asked to do something very big. As she stepped out of the cockpit, the cabin fell into a hush. Every eye turned toward her. She suddenly felt shy, almost overwhelmed by the attention. She wanted to disappear into the crowd, to sit quietly and let everything return to normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Then slowly someone began to clap. It started with one pair of hands, then another. The sound grew, spreading through the cabin until applause filled the space. Some passengers stood. Others wiped tears from their eyes as they clapped. A few whispered words of thanks. The girl froze for a moment, unsure how to react. Her face warmed, and she looked down embarrassed. She had not done this for praise. She had done it because there was no other choice. She walked back to her seat, quietly, guided by a flight attendant. The adult traveling with her wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her close. Only then did the girl fully relax. The strength she had held onto so tightly finally slipped away, replaced by emotion. She cried softly, not from fear anymore, but from release. Outside, news of the incident was already spreading. Emergency. Workers spoke in low voices. Airport staff watched the plane with curiosity and respect. The story sounded almost impossible. An 11-year-old helping guide a plane to safety. Yet there it was, real and undeniable. Inside the cabin, people spoke. More freely now. Some shared stories of what they had felt during the descent. Others sat quietly, lost in thought. Many glanced toward the girl's seat with a look of gratitude they would never forget. She avoided their eyes, not because she was ashamed, but because she didn't feel like a hero. She felt like herself. Just a girl who had listened carefully and tried her best. When the doors finally opened and passengers were allowed to leave, many paused near her row. Some offered quiet thanks. Others simply nodded, unable to find the right words. One older passenger gently touched her arm and said that she would remember this moment forever. The girl nodded politely, still unsure how to respond. As she stepped off the plane, the outside air felt cool and fresh. The noise of the airport rushed back in, loud and busy, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That contrast felt strange. The world had kept moving, even while everything inside that plane had changed. She was taken aside briefly, checked by medical staff, and asked a few gentle questions. Everyone spoke kindly, carefully choosing their words. No one pushed her. No one treated her like something she wasn't. That kindness mattered, later. As she sat quietly away from the crowd, the reality of it all slowly settled in. She thought about the sky, the controls, the voices on the radio. She thought about how fear had felt and how she had kept going anyway. She didn't fully understand what she had done yet. That understanding would come later. For now, all she knew was this: she had been scared, and she had helped. She had listened, stayed calm, and trusted the people guiding her. And because of that, everyone had made it home. The flight was over, but the impact of that moment was only just beginning. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But nothing felt quite the same. For the girl, the noise of the airport faded into memory, yet the experience stayed close, like a quiet shadow. She went back to school, back to homework and familiar routines, but inside her something had shifted. Ordinary moments now carried a deeper meaning. At first, she did not talk much about what had happened. When adults asked questions, she answered simply. She said she followed instructions. She said she stayed calm. She said she was scared. That was all true. She did not describe herself as brave or special. To her, the event felt too big to explain. In neat words, the story spread quickly beyond the airport. People talked about it on the news, in conversations, and online. Many focused on the age, the altitude, the danger. Few understood the quiet details, the patience, the listening. Trust. The girl did not watch the coverage. She didn't want to see her face on screens or hear strangers describe her as something she didn't recognize. At home, the adults around her noticed small changes. She was more thoughtful, more aware. She asked deeper questions about responsibility, about emergencies, about what people do when things go wrong. She listened more carefully when others spoke. The sky outside her window looked different now, not distant and unreachable, but familiar in a way she could not fully explain. Sometimes at night, the memories returned. The blinking lights, the steady voice beside her, the feeling of the plane touching the ground. These memories did not scare her anymore, but they reminded her how close fear and courage can exist together. She learned that being calm does not mean being unafraid. It means choosing to act even when fear is present. People continued to thank her. Letters arrived, quiet messages of gratitude. Some said she had inspired them. She read a few, then set them aside. Praise made her uncomfortable. She had not set out to inspire anyone. She had simply done what was asked, one step at a time. What stayed with her most was not the applause or attention, but the moment of focus. That narrow space in time where everything else fell away, and all that mattered was the next instruction. That feeling taught her something important, that even in chaos, clarity is possible when people work together. The co-pilot checked in, once sending a brief message through the airline. He thanked her again, not as a professional to a child, but as one human to another. He reminded her that teamwork had made the difference. That message meant more to her than any headline ever could. As weeks passed, the world moved on. News cycles changed. New stories replaced old ones. But the impact remained, quietly shaping how she saw herself and the people around her. She understood now that strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and unseen. One afternoon, she looked up at a plane passing overhead. Instead of fear, she felt respect. Respect for the systems, for the people trained to manage them, and for the calm voices that guide others through difficult moments. She knew she did not want attention or fame. What she wanted was understanding of how small actions taken seriously can matter more than anyone expects. That flight had not turned her into a hero in her own eyes. It had turned her into someone more aware of her own abilities and more appreciative of those around her. She learned that age does not define readiness, and that courage often appears without warning. The moment at 30,000 feet would always be part of her story, but it would not define her whole life. It was one chapter, intense and unforgettable, set among many still to come. And whenever she thought back to that day, she remembered one simple truth. When fear arrives without invitation, staying calm can change everything.